Well, hello everyone. Greetings, first of all, to any members of our Pilgrim Church family who has tuned in for this video today, but greetings as well to any visitor who may have tuned in for our study. This is Danny. I'm here once again on behalf of all of the elders at the Church of Christ in Pilgrim with our weekly opportunity for reflection and discernment, or the Word. This is for Wednesday, November 22nd, 2023. Now, that date may be of interest to any of you who are history buffs. You recognize that as the anniversary, and actually today is the 60th anniversary of the tragic assassination of President John F. Kennedy as he was participating in a motorcade through the city of Dallas, Texas. So today we take our current series of devotional videos into a quote-unquote new direction. This study guide this study is based upon a study guide for the entire Bible, which is entitled Bible Blueprints. And today is the first of our 7 sessions that will focus on the 27 books of the New Testament after we completed the Old Testament study last week. The source material for this entire series is a digital online study guide. It was designed and is designed to serve as a quick personal reference source. Each of the 66 Bible books is presented in a one-page outline format. The entire data file is available at this website. Anyone can, go to this site. You can purchase access to an embedded link, and then you have the ability to access that link where you have access to the entire data file. As I said, all 66 individual pages of study. You can download that to your personal computer, and then from that point on, you're free to study them on your monitor, or even to print them out at your leisure and as many times as you wish for your own personal study. Now, even though each book is outlined only on one page of material, there is still a lot of information that's presented within each one of them. Now, I purchased access to this a few months ago with the intentions to add it to my own personal resource for study. And after I reviewed it a bit, I thought, now this just might make a good topic for a video series. And so here we are. Like I said, we just finished the Old Testament study, and today we are beginning our New Testament study. I did some mathematical calculations at the time and determined that the best way to present this adequately without taking an exorbitant amount of time was to cover 4 outlines each week. That's been our format throughout the Old Testament we just completed, and it seems to me that that schedule certainly has been both adequately detailed and manageable in the time constraints. I'll remind you, if you've been here before, that due to copyright restrictions, I am not permitted to show any of the outlines on camera, but I did contact the company before I began and received their permission to use my own personal outline as a basis for presenting verbally the information on this weekly video. Now, I would strongly suggest that you take written notes when you find any information here that's of interest to you as we proceed along, and then you can use that for a study later on for a little bit deeper information, or you may even choose to purchase your own access to the information, the data file, to download to your own laptop or computer, and then you can follow along each week on the screen as I do, or you can even print out a hard copy and use that as reference as we go along. So let's begin our journey through the New Testament by looking at the first 4 books in the New Testament, typically referred to as the 4 Gospels. These are the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we begin with Matthew. Matthew is the first book in the New Testament. It contains 28 chapters, and it is one of the synoptic Gospels. It was written from 50 to 60 AD. Time period covered is from 7 BC to 26 AD, and the author is Matthew, one of the original apostles. Our overview tells us that as one of the Gospels, this book is an account and testimony of Jesus Christ. It was written by Matthew. He was an educated tax collector, and he was also one of the original 12 apostles. His account is unique in that it was written for the Jewish people to persuade them that Jesus was the promised Messiah. Now, Matthew understood the importance of supporting his testimony with Old Testament prophecy, and he cited it more than 50 times. The book is a balance of stories, teachings, miracles, and prophecies. Our review breaks it down into 5 segments. The first segment covers the first 2 chapters and gives us the birth of Jesus that are singular to this gospel. Matthew gives the genealogy of Jesus Christ going back to Abraham. When Joseph is hesitant to wed Mary, an angel appears to him and tells him, "Do not fear about taking her as his wife." Matthew also tells of the Magi, the Herod's slaughter of babies, the escape to Egypt, and Jesus' family's return to Nazareth. The second segment tells us about the teachings of Jesus. This covers Matthew chapters 3 through 25. Matthew shares with his readers the Sermon on the Mount. Of the 23 parables that are included in Matthew, 9 are original, including the parable of the sower, the parable of the 10 virgins, and the parable of the sheep and the goats. Segment 3 gives us the miracles of Christ, again, still in chapters 3 through 25. Of the 18 miracles that Matthew mentions, he tells 2 that are unique: Peter walking on the water, and the coin that was found in the mouth of a fish to be used to pay their temple tax. A healing of 2 blind men may also be unique. Continuing in the 3rd through the 25th chapters, we have the 4th segment about the prophecies of Christ. Matthew's account refers to Peter's confession as the rock of the future church. He also shares Christ's prophecies that the kingdom would be handed over to the Gentiles, that the destruction of the temple would occur in less than 50 years, and a famous description of the end times. Our 5th and final segment covers chapters 26 through 28, which give us the death, resurrection, and ascension details of Christ. Matthew recounts the 30 pieces of silver and the suicide of Judas, Pilate's wife's disturbing dream, the earthquake during the resurrection, and the Great Commission to share Christ's teachings with the world. Moving now to Mark, the second book in the New Testament, which contains 16 chapters and is another synoptic gospel. It was written from 50 to 60 AD. The time period covered is 7 BC to 26 AD, and the author is John Mark, a friend of Peter, who also traveled with the Apostle Paul. Our overview tells us that as one of the Gospels that detail the ministry of Jesus Christ, Mark is written by John Mark, who was a friend of the Apostle Peter and later traveled with the Apostle Paul and his assistant Barnabas on Paul's first missionary journey around Asia Minor. Mark's account is unique in that it is written to the Gentile audience, but he emphasizes Christ's actions more than his teachings. As such, the book is filled with miracles that Jesus performed during his ministry. Mark's testimony shows how powerful, how kind, and how merciful God is. We again have the book divided into 5 segments. The first 2 chapters include the segment that gives the start of the book of Mark. Mark shares the ministry of John the Baptist as it relates to Jesus Christ, but he does not account for Christ's early years. The second segment, chapters 3 through 15, gives us the teachings of Christ. Mark includes 2 original parables, including the parable of the seed secretly growing and the parable of the doorkeeper. Segment 3, also from chapters 3 through 15, gives us the miracles of Christ. 15 miracles are presented by Mark. 3 of them are original: the healing of the deaf-mute man in Decapolis, the blind man at Bethsaida, and the boy who threw himself into the fire. Mark also tells about Jesus calming the storm. Our 4th segment, again, chapters 3 through 15, gives us the prophecies of Christ. Mark recounts Jesus telling Simon Peter and his brother Andrew that he will make them fishers of men. Jesus names James and John, the sons of thunder, and reports the power that left Jesus whenever a bleeding woman touched the hem of his robe. And then the final fifth segment of Mark covers chapters 15 through 16. Here we find the death, resurrection, and ascension details. Mark tells of a young man fleeing naked during the arrest of Jesus, about Pilate asking whether Jesus was already dead. The last verses of Mark are questionable in some people's minds, but they have not been included in some of the older manuscripts. Now we move to the book of Luke, the third book in the New Testament. It contains 24 chapters and is the third of our synoptic gospels. Luke wrote his gospel between 60 and 61 AD. He covered the time period of 7 BC to 26 AD, and he was the author of the book. The third of the Gospels is also an account and testimony of Jesus Christ. It was written by Luke, who was a physician by trade and also a Gentile. His account offers a balanced view of Jesus' ministry, speaking to both the Jew and the Gentile. Much of Luke's Gospel involves Jesus dealing with the common man, and he gives more stories involving women than the other records. The Gospel of Luke shares the good news that Jesus Christ offers salvation for all mankind. Once again, it is divided into 5 segments. Segment 1, the birth of Christ, covers the first 2 chapters. Luke shares the miraculous birth of both John the Baptist and of Jesus. He tells of Mary visiting Elizabeth during her pregnancy. He tells about the birth and the naming of John the Baptist. Luke also recounts the circumstances surrounding the birth of Jesus, specifically the angels who appeared to the shepherds and Simon and Anna, who recognized Jesus in the temple and prophesied concerning him. Our second segment comes from chapters 3 through 21 with the teachings of Christ. Luke shares 24 parables. 11 of those are original. They include the prodigal son, the rich man, and Lazarus. He specifically shares warnings that were given to the religious elite who would often try to trap and trick Jesus. Our third segment includes the miracles of Christ. Again, chapters 3 through 21. Luke presents 21 miracles, 5 of which are original, including the miraculous catch of fish, the raising of the widow of Nain's son from the dead, and the healing of 10 lepers. Our fourth segment details the prophecies of Christ. Again, this comes from the 3rd through the 21st chapter. Luke also shares the prophecies of Jesus during his ministry, specifically when Jesus claimed to be a fulfillment of Isaiah while in the synagogue. Jesus also predicted his death 3 times and the transfiguration. Luke also shares Jesus predicting the future destruction of Jerusalem. And then our 5th and final segment, the death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus. This comes from Luke chapters 22 through 24. Luke shares Pilate's declaration of innocence, Herod's trial, and the criminals at the crucifixion. Luke also recounts the last words of Jesus, his later appearances to the disciples, and his ascension. And then our 4th and final book for today's study, the Gospel of John. It is the 4th in the New Testament. It has 21 chapters, and it is a gospel, not necessarily synoptic, meaning it does not track with the rest of the other gospels, as we'll see in our overview. The book was written between 80 and 90 AD. It covers the time period of 7 BC to 26 AD and was written by John the Apostle. Our overview tells us that this gospel is also an account of the ministry and the testimony of Jesus, but most of John's account is unique to his writing, with 90% being original. Now, while the other 3 Gospels focus on the works and the words of Jesus, John does not contain much of the same fundamental material from the other accounts. It may have been that he was writing at a later date to the members of the Christ Church who were already familiar with Jesus, and he was writing to provoke and to increase their faith. John emphasized more of Jesus' identity as deity as the Son of God. Again, there are 5 segments in this study. The first is the opening of the gospel, the first chapter. John does not tell of the birth of Jesus. Instead, he reaches back to before creation to begin his gospel. He starts with the words, quote, "In the beginning was the Word," end quote. His first words then promote the deity of Christ. Our second segment lists the miracles of Jesus in chapters 1 through 12. John only mentions 7 miracles whose context reflects the divine nature of Jesus. He starts with the miracle at the wedding in Cana, and he ends with the raising of Lazarus. Collectively, this collection of miracles is called the Book of Signs. Our third segment, the I am statements of Christ, one of my personal favorite studies. John chapters 6 through 14. Unique to this gospel are John's sharing of the 7 I am statements of Jesus, which include the bread of life, light of the world, the sheep's gate, the good shepherd, the resurrection and the life, and the way, the truth, and the life. Our fourth segment covers John chapters 13 through 21. It gives the death, resurrection, and ascension details. John shares the events of the Last Supper and the death and resurrection narrative of Jesus Christ. This often is called the Book of Glory because Jesus' death, resurrection, and exaltation are repeatedly referred to as his glorification. And then our fifth and final segment is the epilogue to John's book. This is the 21st chapter. John shares several appearances of Jesus after his resurrection, along with the mandate to teach others of Christ. Although some feel this section may have been added after John's death, it still speaks to the theme of Christ's divinity, frequently emphasized by John throughout his writing. So, there we have our first study of the first 4 books of the New Testament. Now, whether you have been with us throughout all of our previous videos on this topic, or if you have just seen a few of them here and there, or if this is your very first exposure to our study, wherever you may fall within that range, I still hope that the outline studies that you have seen and viewed will produce within you a trio of results. First of all, I hope that this study gives you an appreciation of the value and the depth of scriptural information that is contained within every biblical book, even the ones that may contain much less textual content. Secondly, I hope that you develop a hunger to go beyond just this summary material presented for each book, that it leads you to do more in-depth study on your own, at your own pace and in your own time. And thirdly, I hope that you can see that you recognize that there are some concepts, there are some principles, there are truths that thread their way throughout God's entire word from the beginning to the end. And because of that, they should be a primary focus of our personal study and application as we daily walk with Him. Well, I hope that you'll continue viewing each week's successive videos as we progress in our study of the New Testament books. I also hope that you'll consider whatever time is involved in doing so as being time well spent, even allowing for all my verbal mistakes. As always, each posted video will be archived on our church family's website, and they will thus be available to view whenever one might wish to do so, and as often as you might desire. This can be an especially good way to reach back and view any previous installments that you may have missed along the way. You can simply check out our Pilgrim, Tennessee Church of Christ page on Facebook or the Pilgrim Church Media page on YouTube. Now, if you should find the information from these videos beneficial, which I hope you will, in your personal spiritual walk, then by all means, feel free to mention them, to share them with family or friends who might have an interest in the study as well. So I ask that you will please come back next week, and we will continue our study by looking at the next 4 New Testament books. That would be Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians, and 2 Corinthians. But between now and then, allow me to urge you to make time for a couple of activities that you can do every day. First, spend some quality time alone in prayer to God. Thank Him for all of your blessings. This week, especially, is a good time to be mindful of that. Tell Him of what your needs are. Confess to Him your sins and ask for Him to forgive them, and entreat Him on behalf of others who are in need. Secondly, take some time this week, every day, to spend in your own personal Bible study. Let God speak to you through His holy and inspired living Word, whatever you may study from His Word. Now, if you are not currently attending Bible study or worship services or midweek activities somewhere else, and you live in the Pilgrim area, please accept my invitation to visit us at the Church of Christ in Pilgrim. If you should do so, I can assure you of a warm welcome, along with an opportunity to get to know and to get to grow spiritually alongside a loving body of baptized believers in God, in His Son, and in His Spirit. Wherever you might worship regularly, I just pray that God will shower His blessings upon you and your family every day. Now, as I close today's study, let me do so with a passage of Scripture from each book that we have reviewed today. My New King James Version Bible has an introductory commentary for each book, and each of these introductory commentaries contains a key verse from the book in question. And so I would like to use each verse from this for our closing. We have in Matthew chapter 16, verses 16 through 19. This comes from the New King James Version. Quote, Simon Peter answered and said, You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus answered and said to him, Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. End quote. From Mark, we look at the 10th chapter, verses 43 through 45. This is the New Testament for everyone. But that's not how it's going to be with you. Everyone who wants to be great among you must become your servant. Anyone who wants to be first must be everyone's slave. Don't you see? The Son of Man didn't come to be waited on. He came to be the servant, to give his life as a ransom for many. End quote. For Luke, let's look at chapter 19, verse 10. This is how it's worded in the Revised Geneva translation. Quote, For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save those who have been lost. End quote. And then finally, from the book of John, chapter 20, verses 30 and 31, as it reads in the Revised Standard Version. Quote, Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that, believing, you may have life in his name. End quote. So until our next study, please remember that I love each one of you. Take care and goodbye.